Hold up. This isn't some cheesy kid show. This is Kids in the Tank, a young perspective on business from high school students.
Welcome to Kids in the Tank. I'm Samantha, and with me in the tank are Stephen, Holly, and Luis. Today we are honored to have Jay Butler as our special guest. Jay is the Senior Manager at Nissan Motor Corporation, Quality Executive Leader Coach, and Speaker. Jay, you are officially on the hot seat.
Great. Glad to be here, guys. Looking forward to it.
So, one question we have for you is, what's your favorite car at the moment?
What's my favorite car at the moment? Wow, I've driven a lot of really cool cars. This is going to sound kind of strange. I've never had a truck. Even being from Tennessee, I had a small truck. I've never had a full-size pickup truck. So right now, I'm driving a 2018 Nissan Titan SL crew cab, which is super cool. It's got a 400 horsepower V8 engine in it. Doesn't get the best gas mileage in the world, but man, it's really fun driving a pickup truck. My wife kind of laughs at me a little bit because I'm like a kid with a new toy. But the funnest car I've ever driven is a Mercedes-Benz SLS AMG. So that's the car that's got the gull wing doors on it, and I got the opportunity to test one of those on a test track at the plant when I worked at Mercedes several years ago. We got to go about 150 miles an hour in that on our test track, so that was a lot of fun.
What makes you so focused for developing great terms in the global marketplace?
Probably the biggest thing for me, and this kind of goes what I spoke about earlier with the group about developing people. I don't know if you guys realize this, but there's statistics and studies that have been done by Gallup right now that basically says 70% of the workforce in any given company is not engaged. And what that basically means is that 70% of everybody that comes to the plant every day, and there's about 6,000 people at Nissan. So, over 4,000 people that show up at work every day, they're not really engaged in what's going on. They're just trying to survive. To me, that's really, really sad. You're going to spend, a large portion of your life when you get out working. Hopefully, you're going to find a job you love. You're going to work with people you love. But, to think that you got that many people that spend that much of their day, each day, just drudging through their day. And it's not about making the work easy per se, but it's about making work fun again. I love building cars. There's nothing like starting with a piece of blank sheet metal, watching it go through a big press, get stamped into body parts, welded up, painted, assembled, and drive off the end of an assembly line. That's fun. That's interesting. And to think that people come to work every day and hate their job, that's one thing that's really kind of changed my career path over the last 5 or 6 years is how do I develop and work with my team members so they actually enjoy coming to work, they have fun at work, and they go home in a great mood talking about how much fun they had building great products and changing people's lives. So that's really where my focus is at now, and it's really what drives me. It's why I spend so much of my time developing the leadership that I work with, whether it's my managers, my supervisors in the plant, so that they can lead others better. And so team members, they go home to their families satisfied, feeling like they've done good work. They can put their kids through college, that they can go on nice vacations, that they can afford to take care of their families and not be worn out, not be just hating life. That's really what drives me a lot nowadays, and it's where I spend a lot of my time.
So I saw that Nissan has a lot of emphasis on diversity. So how do you approach attracting people of diverse backgrounds?
That's a very interesting question, because the tendency we have, if you get into a lot of hiring and recruiting, the tendency you have is to hire people that you have a lot in common with. That's our tendency. So you really have to be focused to look for diversity. And it's not so much, I know when we talk about diversity, most people think ethnic, racial diversity, gender diversity, and those kinds of things. But real success comes in cognitive diversity, and that's getting people around you that think differently than you do. So one of the questions that came up is, I work a lot with engineers over my career, but I've had a lot of people who have the title engineer that have no engineering background, actually have some very strange, you would say strange backgrounds, history majors, English majors, that now work in manufacturing. So what we have to realize, though, is that diversity of thought and ideas makes companies better, makes companies more successful, makes companies more creative. It's great to have hugely diverse teams, male, female, different races, the whole thing. It's you really have to realize that it's to your advantage to have that diversity. There's tons of studies out there that show the more diversity you have, especially the way people think, the better opportunity you have for more creative solutions. You get a bunch of engineers together in a room and they're all going to think alike. You put some English majors in there, you put a history major in there, maybe you put somebody who went to a liberal arts school, psychology background, you get all those different kinds of people in a room, you'll come up with a better solution almost every time. So you really have to be intentional about it, and really seek to pull in different backgrounds. I've done a lot of hiring even since I've been at Nissan, a lot of promotions, and I always try to look at the overall team and say, who's going to be the best fit for this position? I don't necessarily say, is it male or female? Is it African American? Is it Mexican? Is it Latino, or whatever it may be? I look at their history, their background, how they deal with people, and are they going to challenge the team, and really try to hire based on those kinds of things.
So how do you keep your team engaged throughout the work week, and what do you consider most important for an employee to stay on top of things?
Engagement, it's a great big topic nowadays. And what we have found, and what I've found in my own career, is the way to keep team members engaged is to give them opportunities to grow, give them opportunities to develop. So, in my career at Mercedes and even now at Nissan, about every year and a half, 2 years, I had the opportunity to move to a different position. And I want the same for my team members, even if they stay within the team, but they get given different responsibilities. So that's one thing, is give people opportunity to try new things and develop and grow themselves. The other thing to keep team members engaged is to interact with them. It can be very easy in a plant like Nissan Canton, where you've got so many thousands of people working. I mean, just my team, my current department is over 400 people. You have to be very intentional about going and seeing people and spending time with them and asking how things are going. What can I do to help? What kind of things are getting in your way? Hey, we're having a problem with this. What are your thoughts? What are your ideas? That's how to keep team members engaged, is give them the opportunity to grow and develop themselves, and interact with them on a as frequent a basis as possible. And I can't do that every day because I have team members working at night. The plant runs around the clock, but I'll come in on night shift. That's why I'll do that training on night shift, because then I get the opportunity to see those team members on night shift and see how they're doing and what I can do to help them as their senior manager. So again, opportunities to develop and grow, training opportunities to try new jobs, and then just the interaction with team members to understand what's going on and what they're frustrated with. That's how you really drive engagement in any organization.
Thank you.
Why did you go to school again after 21 years to get your master's degree in business administration?
It's a good question. My wife asks me that often. She says it's because I get bored too easily, and I needed something to do. I don't know if that's necessarily the answer. It goes back to this, what I mentioned in the web cast, that I really believe that learning is important, and I like to have the challenge of taking on new things. I never really thought about getting an MBA until about a year and a half ago. And I thought, okay, I've done the engineering track and I've been very technical in my background in engineering. And now I'm in the people side of things more and more, I find, in my career. And it almost came as a natural, hey, I wonder if I should get an MBA? And then it's actually quite easy to do nowadays because of the availability online. And I mean, it was just another challenge. I don't know what I'm going to do after this. I should finish my MBA next summer, I think. I think I got one more year, and I got a year and a half left. I'm about halfway through it right now. Then what's next on my list? I want to write a book. So that's the next thing on my list.
Have you always had a passion in the motor vehicle industry, or did your first few jobs set you towards that path?
I've always liked cars. I've still got my first car, 1966 Chevy Chevelle. So I've always thought about automotive. I never wanted to go live in Detroit, so I never thought that automotive would necessarily be an option for me. But as you know, the automotive industry is spread out quite a bit over the U.S., and especially in Alabama. There are now 4 major automotive OEM plants in the southeast region. You've got Kia in West Point, Georgia. You've got Mercedes in Birmingham. Honda has a plant in Lincoln, Alabama. Hyundai has a plant just outside of Montgomery. And then over here in Mississippi, you've got Nissan. Toyota has a plant here. Toyota and Mazda just announced a new joint venture. They're going to open it in Huntsville, Alabama. So I'd wanted to work in automotive, but I didn't think I would get there because I didn't want to live up north. I didn't want to live in Detroit. Didn't mind traveling to Detroit. Loved to travel to Detroit, but I didn't want to live there. So I didn't think I would end up in automotive, but it just happened that it worked out. So.
What was your biggest why to start a leadership group, and what is your biggest tip when you give a motivational speech?
The biggest why goes back to what I talked to you about before was this engagement number. To think that 7 out of 10 employees come to work every day just trying to survive. And if you look at the data and what drives engagement, leadership drives engagement. Companies that have great leaders who are out there and involved and really care about their employees and demonstrate that caring through their actions and the words they say and the way they lead their organizations have higher engagement numbers. And companies with higher engagement numbers outperform all other companies, hands down. And I also learned over my career that leadership, the ability to lead people, and I'm not necessarily talking here about having a title, the ability to influence the people that you work with leads to the greatest success. John Maxwell says nothing of significance happens without a team. And in order to lead a team and develop a team and see really great things happen, you need to know how to lead. And so that's what got me into this whole arena of leadership. How do I deal better with the people that I work with? Whether it's my colleagues on the same level or the people that work in my team who work for me, and so that's what really drove me into the whole leadership thing. And I saw, when I worked for that company for Mark IV Automotive in West Tennessee, I started there as an engineer, product engineer. There was 5 product engineers in the team. And I started to develop my leadership and my ability to influence and lead the other members of the team. And I became, over that 6 years, the senior engineer for the group, all great engineers and chemists. And we did some great stuff as a team because we learned how to function as a team. We wrote patents. And we developed a lot of new materials. And all those kinds of things happened because it was a group, a team effort. So that's really what got me into the whole leadership thing, because I saw what's possible when you do things with a great team. And as far as the motivational speeches, it goes back to the learning thing. I just tell people, you know, things are changing so fast nowadays. What you learn in college, just a few years after you get out, there's going to be new information. There's going to be new data. We're going to have new things that we've learned. You've got to continually push yourself and develop and learn and, you know, make learning a habit. I get up every morning at 4:30 in the morning. I don't get to the plant until 7 a.m. That 2.5 hours in the morning is my devotional time, but I spend at least an hour to an hour and a half reading in the morning, whether it's for my MBA program, whether it's a leadership book that I'm reading that I want to share with my team, or it's some kind of other Harvard Business Review articles, whatever it may be. I do that every single day. The only time I ever miss is when we have a early morning all manager meeting at the plant, and those things happen at like 6 o'clock in the morning. So I don't get to have my time in the morning. And I do those things in the morning because it gets my mind right. It gets my head on straight before I go to work, and I'm ready to go tackle a day because I'm ready. I'm engaged, and I've stimulated my mind first thing in the morning. I like to run, and I like to ride road bikes and mountain bikes, and I do all that kind of stuff in the evenings as a way to unwind. But to get me going in the morning, I spend that time reading. That's what I do.
All right, so thank you for answering our questions. We'll now be moving into our next segment, Flip It, where you will be asking us the questions. So thank you.
Okay. So first question, it's up to anybody to answer. What do you think is going to be the biggest challenge for your generation going forward in terms of your college education or whether you start a small business? How are you going to make that decision?
I think a lot of times with our generation, a lot of people think we don't have enough drive for it. We don't have the drive to do things. They think that we have a lot of things the easy way. And I think there's reasons why people believe that, but I also think our generation is one of the smartest and one of the people that like have the most drive on doing things. I think that's how our generation will keep on doing greater things while going towards college or having a small business, and having that drive to do things will keep our generation moving forward, I think.
All right. So, you know, all the millennial question always comes up in almost everything that I hear about, and we even talk about it at work. So how do you think that you're going to overcome those challenges and those stereotypes as you get into the workplace? What do you think you need to do in order to overcome those things and work with a cross-generational organization?
I think we got to take into consideration like that they have a lot more experience in things, but like we need to educate ourselves more as to what we're learning about, like you said multiple times. And I feel like that will definitely help out with like the conflict between whatever's going on with your colleagues.
Yeah, it's absolutely a challenge, and it's a challenge for both sides, right? I mean, you know, and we need to be very careful about stereotypes. My 3 kids are all very, very different, and they're, you know, my oldest daughter's 23, my youngest one's 18, and they're vastly different in the way they do things. They have very different majors as well. My oldest daughter's an art major, and my youngest daughter's going into physical therapy. So they have very different personalities. So I think one of the big things that we're all challenged with, and I even find myself challenged with, is to understand, you know, we want to put people in a box, and we want to say, well, this generation is Generation X or Generation Y, or it's a millennial, or it's a baby boomer. But, you know, I think the main key there is that we learn from each other, you know, learn how to challenge that older generation in a respectful way so that you can show them some new things. You know, that was interesting when I got out of college is I worked with some guys who had been in industry for 30 years. And you guys probably don't even remember what computers were like before Windows came along. these guys were still used to running DOS-based programs, and working together with them to show them how to use Windows was a big deal. So you guys have a great advantage, I think, in this time and the technology that you're used to, that you've been exposed to your whole life. The challenge is going to be how to bridge the gap between those different generations and work together as a team, because like you just said, they have lots of experience. Okay. And how you can learn and share in that experience with them is a huge opportunity for both sides, for the younger generations and the older generations. So let me ask you this question: what is your biggest challenges you see right now going forward for your generation?
I think finding a place to start for a lot of us, because everybody that's come in has told us, like, you don't have to know what you're doing, but figuring out the place to start, deciding, like, this is really what I'm passionate about, this is what I can see myself doing for either the rest of my life or the next few years until, I find another opportunity. But I think that's probably right now where we're at the biggest challenge when, like, even deciding in college or, like, going straight into a career is what path to take.
Yeah, that's a good one. My daughter, and I keep using her as an example. She just started school, and she originally thought maybe she wanted to be a veterinarian, right? And then it was a nurse, pediatrics nurse. Now it's going into maybe physical therapy, and all these kind of changes that ideas she's got in her head have really only been happening over the last probably 3 or 4 years of her life. One of the things I tell her is, hey, don't worry about it. Start out in physical therapy or nursing. Get a couple of years under your belt in college. Do some summer intern jobs. And then figure out what you want to do. When I started out my career as a co-op student, I worked in the textile industry. Okay, that was my first job. I worked in the maintenance department for Milliken and Company in LaGrange, Georgia, in a textile plant. And then my second company that I worked for was James River Corporation, and they produced packaging for the food industry, so like Pop-Tart and cream cheese boxes. They printed those things in a plant there just outside of Cookeville, Tennessee. My third job out of college, we made industrial hose and belts and automotive hoses. That was my first taste of the automotive industry. And now I work at an OEM, and my second OEM, building complete vehicles. And again, you say, well, that's all manufacturing. But, in all those times, I did jobs that were really, really interesting. I've done logistics work. So how to get parts from point A to point B. I've done, headed up repair and retrofit operations at the automotive plants. I've done a job where, Mercedes, some plants around the world, they are called CKD or SKD plants, which are basically, it means semi-knockdown or complete knockdown. And these are basically plants. They don't all they do is assemble a vehicle. They don't make any of the parts. They don't even paint the vehicle. We used to take vehicles at Mercedes, and we would imagine, you guys know model car kits, right?
Mm-hmm.
We would basically take all the parts needed to make a complete Mercedes, box them up, and ship them to Taiwan or Indonesia. And those plants would assemble them. And so that was learning logistics processes. Again, there's no engineering in a logistics process. It's just, that's like what UPS does or what FedEx does. So, there's going to be so many opportunities out there for you. And the main thing is going to be, are you willing to learn new things? If you're willing to learn new things, then, man, there's no telling what you can end up doing. Everybody from this, I guess this whole thing is taking place in Wisconsin, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So are all you guys from that area?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So all born and raised, right? So how willing are you to step outside where you're from and go live somewhere else and try something new when you come out of college? Because you may have the opportunity to go live internationally or work in a completely different part of the United States. I mean, how would you face that kind of challenge? And do you think you would have problems getting support from your families for something like that?
Honestly, for me, I don't think it would be that big of a step. But for some families, some parents don't want their kids to go away from home. So I think that you just really need to talk to your family and see what the decisions you make and see how it works out with them.
Yeah. So what would you tell, so what if I sat with you guys and said, what would be the thing that you would most want my generation to understand about your generation, and how could we help you be successful working in the world today? What would you want us to know about your generation? Because I hear a lot of things that people talk about your generation, but what would you want us to know?
I think just how hard we also work, just how I think our new generation or our generation have pretty big differential ideals of, let's say, another older generation. So maybe understanding those ideals and having the same ground on like ideas and stuff like that would be a great help to us.
Okay. So how would you go about bridging those gaps? Because I know nowadays, a lot of people like to make assumptions about different groups, or different generations or races. One of the questions that came up in the webinar was about what's it like to work with other people, like from Asia or Germany, Europeans. And, my message is, they have some different customs, right? But people really in general, they want to be treated fairly and with respect. They want to be heard. They want to be listened to. It doesn't mean we have to agree on everything. But we should have the opportunity to hear each other out and talk in a civil manner. Unfortunately, nowadays it's much harder to accomplish. It seems like in the public sector, but hopefully we're going to get through all that. So, what would you want us? How else could we help make that work?
I think just to understand that, I feel like our generation is very ideas people, and we're always like looking how to improve things and new ways to do things, versus where other generations are really stuck in like, this is the way that works and this is the way that will always work. But everything changes so fast that like we're used to that, and we're always going to be able to like come up with ideas. So I think asking for input and just getting us engaged in what we're doing, because I know that a lot of us struggle like in school or stuff like that if we don't have a say in what's going on. And I think that giving us some sort of a say, or some sort of even just like going back and forth, bouncing ideas off of each other would be huge in a lot of workplaces for just improving the workplace socially, as well as on a scale like production wise.
Mm. Yeah, that's an interesting comment you made, because one of the big keys to having an engaged workforce is giving people the opportunity to have voice. It doesn't mean at the end of the day that you would change a policy or a procedure, but people like to have their voices heard, even if you don't change something. But to consider their input and to hear them out is a huge deal when it comes to employee engagement. That's one of the things I teach in my leadership classes with managers and supervisors. Even if you don't change a policy or you decide to go a different path, giving your team members, your technicians, the opportunity to have voice and have input into those decisions, and then explain to them why we have decided to go this way, rather than just you make a decision and you don't get any input from anybody, is a huge barrier to engagement nowadays. Even they like to call it at Nissan, what we call it there is playing catch ball. So if we're trying to come up with a solution on a problem, we have a catch ball session. And we don't literally toss a ball around the room, but the idea is we toss ideas around and we brainstorm, and they call it a catchball session. And it's really about giving people the opportunity to speak up. And those meetings are the most productive when you have a diversity of ideas in the room. And that comes from having a diversity of people in the room from, different ages as well as thoughts, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, and different cultures. The Japanese think very differently than Americans do, even versus Germans. That took a long time for me to learn when I started working for Daimler. There's some cultural differences there, the way they handle business. So like the Germans, typically the Germans can be very hard and very stern in a meeting session, in a meeting setting. They will be very harsh and abrasive at times. And then as soon as the meeting over, it's like everything's fine. Let's go have dinner. Americans, we get very passionate about stuff. And, in sports, we don't let stuff go. We tend to sometimes have a hard time separating the two. So you understand that when you get in a meeting, a very heated debate with some of my German colleagues in my past work with Daimler, hey, it's absolutely nothing personal. They're very passionate and can be very harsh in the way they carry things out. My experience so far with the Japanese is that it's much more about honor. They're very honor-bound society still. And so many times it's not quite as a harsh an environment. So these are things you have to get used to. But again, it goes back to having the diversity of thought and the diversity of opinion. And when you do that, you're better able to engage with your team members. And they want that. They want that. And that's important for a leader to be able to do those kinds of things. Well, that's really the questions that I had for this evening session. So anything else from you guys?
Thank you so much for joining us over the phone. We really appreciate your insight into all of this. Thank you.
Well, it's absolutely been my pleasure to spend some time with you guys tonight. I hope you got some things out of it. Again, I want to encourage you to develop an attitude of learning and growth for your whole career, because you're absolutely going to need it. Things are, like you said, things are going to be changing so fast, and I don't see that ever changing. It's only going to get even faster as we develop AI and all these other activities. As machine learning continues to grow and develop, the need to expand your career horizons and learn new things is going to be so important. So I just would encourage you to be prepared to stay on this learning journey for the rest of your life.